I never told my son Marcus about my $40,000 monthly salary. Never. Even though he always saw me living what appeared to be the most ordinary, simple life. My name is Alara Sterling, and this is the story of how I brought my son's wealthy in-laws to their knees. This is the story of a mother who decided to play the part of a broken, naive fool just to expose the rotten core of an arrogant family. And trust me, they deserved every moment of the devastation that followed. One day, Marcus, my 35-year-old son, invited me to dinner. His wife, Simone, had her parents visiting from overseas and they wanted to meet me. The moment Marcus asked me to come, I felt the lie he was living. I heard the nervousness in his voice, not of a son inviting his mother, but of a man asking a favor. Please, Mom, don't embarrass me. Try to fit in. I decided right then that I would see exactly how they would treat a poor, struggling person, the person they expected me to be. I decided to give them a performance. A broken, naive mother barely surviving. But the moment I stepped through the door of that high-end restaurant, everything changed. What happened that night devastated my daughter-in-law and her family in a way they never imagined. It started with a simple truth: Marcus never knew who I really was. To him, I was always just the woman who left early for the office, who came back tired in the evenings, who cooked with whatever was in the fridge. I was just another employee, maybe a secretary, someone ordinary, nothing special. And I never corrected him. I never told him I earned $40,000 every single month. I never let on that I had been a senior executive, a regional director of operations at a major multinational corporation for almost 2 decades, signing million-dollar contracts and making decisions that affected the lives of tens of thousands of people across 5 countries. Why tell him? Money was never something I needed to hang on the wall like a trophy. I grew up in an era where dignity was carried within, where silence was a shield, and confidence was the only currency that mattered. So I guarded my truth fiercely. I lived in the same modest apartment for years. I used the same worn leather handbag until it was practically falling apart. I bought my clothes at discount chains, I cooked at home, and I saved and invested everything. I became rich in silence because true power doesn't shout. True power observes, and I was observing closely. If this hook has already grabbed you, and if you love stories of justice, secrets, and dramatic revenge, please take a second right now to smash that subscribe button. We have many more incredible true story narratives coming that you absolutely won't want to miss. Now, back to Alara's astonishing secret. Marcus called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice was taut, nervous, like when he was a child and had done something wrong. Mom, I need to ask you a favor. Simone's parents are visiting from overseas. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday at a restaurant. Please come. Do they know anything about me? I asked calmly, already knowing the answer. There was a silence, heavy and thick with shame. Then Marcus stammered, I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much. There it was. The word simple, as if my entire life could be contained and dismissed in that one miserable adjective. As if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I took a deep, deliberate breath. Okay, Marcus, I'll be there. I hung up the phone and looked around my living room. Old but comfortable furniture, walls without expensive artwork, a small TV, nothing that would impress anyone. And at that moment, I decided on my role. If my son thought I was a poor woman, and if his wife's parents were coming ready to judge me, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke, naive, and desperate. A mother barely surviving on the fringes. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone who had absolutely nothing. I wanted to see their true faces because I suspected something dark. I suspected Simone and her family, Veronica and Franklin, were the type of people who measured others only by their bank accounts. And in my 40 years of corporate warfare, my instinct had never, ever failed me. Saturday arrived, the day of the performance. I dressed meticulously in the worst outfit I owned. I didn't just choose something modest, I chose something deliberately depressing. It was a light gray, shapeless, wrinkled dress, the kind they sell at a thrift store that smells faintly of mothballs and regret. I wore old, worn-out shoes that had seen too many rainy seasons. No jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag, the perfect accessory for a woman broken by life, pulled my hair back into a messy, uncontrolled ponytail, and looked in the mirror. I looked forgettable. I looked poor. I looked perfect. I got into a taxi and gave the address, a high-end, exclusive restaurant in the most opulent part of the city. This was the kind of place where the menu did not list prices, where the cutlery and porcelain alone cost more than the average person's monthly salary. As we drove through the sparkling streets, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Anticipation, because I knew a massive confrontation was coming, and sadness, because a small, desperate part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would treat me kindly, that they would look past the old clothes and see a human being. But the other part of me, the hardened woman who had spent 4 decades among corporate sharks, that part knew exactly what kind of malice was waiting for me. The taxi stopped in front of a facade of warm lights, a polished doorman in white gloves, and a continuous stream of elegantly dressed people entering. I paid the driver, stepped out, took a deep breath, and crossed the threshold into the lion's den. There they were. Marcus was standing nervously by a long table near the windows. He wore a dark, expensive suit, a crisp white shirt, and shiny shoes. He looked anxious, clearly worried about this meeting. Beside him was Simone, my daughter-in-law. She was draped in a tailored cream dress with gold accents, teetering on high heels, her perfectly straight, expensive-looking hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impeccable, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking toward the entrance with a tense, almost embarrassed expression. And then I saw the royalty, Simone's parents, Veronica and Franklin, already seated at the table, waiting like judges on their thrones. Veronica, the mother, wore a fitted emerald green dress full of sequins. Jewels glittered on her neck, wrists, and fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back into an aggressively elegant bun. She had that cold, calculated type of beauty that screams, "Do not approach." Beside her was Franklin, her husband, an immaculate gray suit, a giant heavy watch glinting on his wrist, and a serious, unsmiling expression. They both looked like they had stepped directly out of a luxury magazine, ready to dismiss anyone who didn't meet their standard. I walked toward them slowly, deliberately taking short, timid steps as if I were afraid of scuffing the floor. Marcus saw me first, and his face instantly crumpled. His eyes widened, and I noticed him swallow hard as he looked me up and down, processing the sheer poverty of my attire. "Mom, you said you'd come," he muttered, his voice thick with discomfort. "Of course, son, here I am," I replied, forcing a small, timid smile, the smile of a woman entirely unaccustomed to such places. Simone greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, cold, mechanical, and totally disingenuous. "Mother-in-law, it's nice to see you." But her eyes, fleeting and dismissive, screamed the opposite. She introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic tone. "Dad, Mom, this is Marcus's mother, Alara." Veronica looked up from the table, and in that instant I saw everything I had come to find. The naked judgment, the undisguised disdain, and the profound disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my faded canvas tote, taking precise inventory of my lack of worth. She didn't say anything at first, just extended a hand, cold, quick, and weak, a perfunctory gesture. "A pleasure." Franklin did the same, a weak handshake, a false, polite smile. "Charmed." I sat down in the chair at the end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a distant, second-class guest. No one offered to help me pull out the chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived almost immediately, distributing the elegant, heavy menus written in French. I opened mine and pretended not to understand a single word. Veronica watched me, a tiny, patronizing smirk playing on her lips. "Do you need help with the menu, Alara?" she asked, the smile not reaching her cold eyes. "Yes, please," I replied, my voice small and timid. "I'm afraid I don't know what these words mean." She sighed, a dramatic display of inconvenience, and then addressed the waiter. She ordered for me. "Something simple for her," she instructed. "Something that doesn't cost too much, we don't want to overdo it." The phrase hung in the opulent air, heavy with insult. Franklin nodded in agreement. Marcus quickly looked away, staring intensely at the expensive glassware. Simone played nervously with her napkin. No one said a word, and I just watched, smiling my timid, empty smile. My rage, however, was already beginning to simmer, a deep, controlled heat far below the surface. Veronica started the conversation, talking first about general things. The tiresome journey from abroad, how long the flight was, and how different, meaning less sophisticated, everything was here. Then, like a predator circling its prey, she subtly began to introduce the subject of money. She mentioned the hotel where they were staying, $1,000 a night, but we insist on comfort. She mentioned the luxury car they had rented, obviously. She recounted the high-end stores they had visited. We bought a few things. Nothing major, just a few thousands, she said, ensuring her gaze was fixed firmly on me. She spoke, expecting a reaction, expecting me to be impressed, expecting me to shrink further into my cheap gray dress. I just nodded, keeping my expression bland. How nice, I said. That's lovely. You know, Alara, she continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, we've always been very careful with money. We worked hard, and most importantly, we invested well. Now Franklin has major businesses and we have properties in 3 countries. And I oversee our investments. She beamed, a smile of profound superiority. And you, Alara, what exactly do you do? Her tone was sickeningly sweet but laced with venom, like sugar coating arsenic. I work in an office, I replied, deliberately lowering my gaze, making myself seem small. I do a little bit of everything, paperwork, filing, simple things. Veronica exchanged a knowing, superior look with Franklin, a look that conveyed, see, told you. Ah, I see, administrative work, that's fine, she said dismissively. It's honest, all jobs are dignified, right? Of course, I replied. You are quite right. The food arrived, enormous heavy plates carrying tiny, artfully decorated portions that looked more like sculptures than sustenance. Veronica cut her steak with careful, practiced precision. This costs $80, she announced, clearly talking to me, though she was looking at her husband. But it's worth it. Quality is worth paying for, isn't it? One simply can't eat just anything, right? I nodded again, trying to sound naive. Of course, you're right. Marcus, bless his heart, tried desperately to change the subject, mentioning some projects at his own job. But Veronica sharply interrupted him, determined to return to the attack. Son, does your mother live alone? Marcus's shoulders slumped slightly. Yes, she has a small apartment. Veronica looked at me with an expression of feigned, exaggerated pity. It must be difficult, isn't it, Alara? Living alone at your age without much support? And does your salary, she paused, emphasizing the word salary, cover everything? Do you manage? I felt the trap closing in, designed to force me to beg for sympathy. I barely replied, but I manage, I save where I can. I truly don't need much. Veronica sighed dramatically, leaning back against the plush velvet seat. Oh, Alara, you are so brave. Truly, I admire women who struggle alone. Although, of course, one always wishes to give one's children more to give them a better life. But oh well, everyone gives what they can. There it was, the subtle but deadly blow. She wasn't just insulting my job or my clothes, she was telling me in front of my son that I hadn't been enough for Marcus. That I hadn't given him the life he deserved. That I was a poor, insufficient mother. Simone kept her eyes glued to her plate, looking miserable. Marcus had his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching under the table, and I, the broken woman, just smiled. Yes, you're absolutely right, I agreed softly. Everyone gives what they can. Veronica, emboldened by my apparent defeat, continued her self-aggrandizing monologue. We always made sure Simone had the best. She went to the best schools, traveled the world, learned 4 languages. Now she has an excellent job and earns very well. And when she married Marcus, well, we helped them quite a bit. We gave them money for the down payment on the house. We paid for their honeymoon because that's just who we are. We believe in supporting our children generously. She looked directly at me, the challenge clear in her eyes. And you, Alara, were you able to help Marcus with anything when they got married? The question hung in the air like a sharp, poisoned knife. Not much, I replied, trying to sound ashamed. I gave them what I could, a small gift. Veronica smiled, that dreadful, triumphant smile. How sweet, every detail counts, right? The amount doesn't matter, the intention is what's truly important. And right then, I felt the cold rage fully solidify within me. It wasn't explosive, it was controlled, crystalline, and directed. I breathed slowly, maintained my meek demeanor, and let Veronica keep talking because that is what people like her do best. They talk, they inflate themselves, they show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal themselves, the more they expose the profound, hollow emptiness inside. Veronica took a long, exaggerated sip from her glass of expensive red wine, swirling it theatrically in her hand as if she were a seasoned sommelier. "This wine," she announced to the table, "is from an exclusive region in France. It costs $200 a bottle, but when you know true quality, you simply don't skimp." She fixed her gaze on me, the supposed expert addressing the ignorant pupil. "Do you drink wine, Alara?" "Only on special occasions," I replied, my voice light and humble. "And usually the cheapest one I can find. I don't understand much about these things." Veronica smiled, a classic, patronizing sneer. "Oh, don't worry, dear, not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Franklin and I have visited vineyards in Europe, South America, and California. We are quite knowledgeable, you see." Franklin, feeling the need to contribute to the show, nodded gravely. "It's a hobby, Alara, something we enjoy. Simone is learning too. She has good taste. She inherited it from us." He looked at Simone with pride, forcing her to offer a weak, pained smile. Veronica then turned her full attention back to me. "And you, Alara, do you have any hobbies? Anything you enjoy doing in your free time?" I shrugged innocently. "I watch television, I cook, I walk in the park, simple things." Veronica and Franklin exchanged yet another loaded look, a silent judgment that declared my life utterly mundane and worthless. "How lovely," Veronica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Simple things have their charm too, although of course one always aspires to more, right? To see the world, to experience new things, to grow culturally. But well, I understand not everyone has those opportunities." "You're right," I agreed quietly. "Not everyone has those opportunities." The waiter arrived with dessert, tiny portions of something that looked like edible modern art. Veronica ordered the most expensive one, a small piece of cake that cost $30. "This is delicious," she declared after the first bite. "It has edible gold on top. See those little golden flakes? It's a detail only the best restaurants offer." I ate my simpler, cheaper dessert in silence. Veronica continued, her voice lowering, signaling a shift to the serious part of the evening. "You know, Alara, I think it's important that we talk about something as a family now that we are all here." She looked up and her expression changed, becoming serious, falsely maternal, and terribly calculating. "Marcus is our son-in-law and we love him very much. Simone loves him and we respect that decision. But as parents, we always want the best for our daughter. Marcus is at another stage in his life now. He is married. He has responsibilities and well, Simone and he deserve to have stability." "Stability?" I asked softly, knowing exactly where she was going. "Yes," Veronica replied, nodding firmly, "financial and emotional stability. We have helped them a lot and we will continue to help. But we also believe it's important that Marcus doesn't have unnecessary burdens." The phrase hung in the air like a final, devastating verdict. She was calling me, his mother, a burden. Simone was now staring so intently at her plate I thought she might burn a hole through the porcelain. Marcus had his jaw locked shut, his hands clenched beneath the table. "Burdens?" I repeated, allowing a hint of confusion into my small voice. Veronica sighed dramatically, as if she were the one carrying the impossible weight. "I don't want to sound harsh, Alara, but at your age, living alone with a limited salary, it's natural for Marcus to worry about you, to feel that he must take care of you. And that's fine, he is a good son, but we don't want that worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand me?" "Perfectly," I replied. My heart was pounding, but my face remained placid. The moment of the bait was here. Veronica smiled, that awful victorious smile. "I'm glad you understand. That's why Franklin and I wanted to talk to you. We have thought about something." She paused for maximum dramatic effect. "We could help you financially. Give you a small monthly allowance, something that allows you to live more comfortably without Marcus having to worry so much." She rushed to qualify the offer so as not to seem too generous. "Obviously, it would be modest. We can't work miracles, but it would be a support." I remained utterly silent, just watching her, waiting for the true price. She continued, and in exchange, we would only ask you to respect Marcus and Simone's space, not to seek them out so much, not to pressure them, to give them the freedom to build their life together without interference. She concluded, pleased with her solution. How does that sound? There it was, the bribe thinly disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me off. They wanted to pay me to vanish from my son's life so that my poverty wouldn't embarrass their precious, wealthy daughter. Marcus, bless his honest heart, finally exploded, his voice tight with humiliation. Mom, that's enough, you don't have to listen to this. Veronica cut him off with a sharp, dismissive wave of her hand. Marcus, calm down, we're talking like adults. Your mother understands, right? I picked up my napkin slowly, deliberately, and calmly wiped my lips. I took a measured sip of water and let the silence, the expectant, heavy silence, grow until it was suffocating. Everyone was looking at me, Veronica with greedy anticipation, Franklin with bored arrogance, Simone with profound shame, and Marcus with desperate fear. And then I spoke. My voice came out utterly different. It was no longer timid. It was no longer small or meek. It was firm, perfectly clear, and cuttingly cold, the voice of an executive who commands hundreds of millions. That's an interesting offer, Veronica, truly very generous of you. Veronica smiled, a smug, victorious grin spreading across her face. I'm glad you see it that way, Alara. I nodded slowly, but I have a few questions just to ensure I understand the terms clearly. Veronica blinked, confused by the sudden steel in my voice. Of course, ask whatever you like. I leaned forward slightly, fixing her with a gaze that had brokered billion-dollar deals. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance? She hesitated, caught off guard. Well, we were thinking about $500, maybe $700 depending on your needs. I nodded again. I see. $700 a month for me to disappear from my son's life. Veronica's triumphant expression faltered. She frowned. I wouldn't put it like that, Alara. But yes, I responded, my voice sharp as glass. That is exactly how you put it. She adjusted in her chair, suddenly uncomfortable. Alara, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help. Of course, I said, emphasizing the word. Help. How did you help with the house down payment, Veronica? How much was that contribution? Veronica, still clinging to her role as the benefactor, puffed out her chest. $40,000. Actually, a full $40,000. Ah, $40,000, I mused. How generous. And the honeymoon, the long trip through Europe, how much did that cost? $15,000, she said quickly. Incredible. Unbelievable, I replied, my sarcasm slicing through the polite air. So, you've invested about $55,000 in Marcus and Simone. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. I paused, letting my words hang heavy. But tell me something, Veronica. All that investment, all that money, did it buy you anything of real value? Did it buy you respect? Did it buy you real, unconditional love? Or did it just buy you obedience? The atmosphere at the table shifted violently. Veronica stopped smiling altogether. Excuse me, she hissed. My tone became sharper, colder. You have spent the entire night talking about money, how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have. But you haven't asked even once how I am, if I'm happy, if something hurts me, if I need company. You have only calculated my worth, and apparently I am worth $700 a month to you. Veronica paled, shaking her head. I didn't? Yes, you did, I interrupted, overriding her completely. Since I arrived, you've been measuring my value with your wallet. And do you know what I discovered, Veronica? I discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand their own true value. Franklin intervened, trying to save his wife. I think you are grossly misinterpreting my wife's intentions, Alara. I looked at him directly, not blinking. And what were her intentions, Franklin? To treat me with pity, to humiliate me throughout dinner, to offer me alms so I would simply vanish? Franklin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Marcus was now ghostly pale. Mom, please, he whispered. No, Marcus, please don't, I said, looking at him with resolute clarity. I'm done being quiet. I placed the used napkin neatly on the table, leaning back in my chair. There was no more timidity in my posture. I looked Veronica directly in the eyes. She held my gaze for a second, then quickly, involuntarily looked away. Something seismic had changed, and she felt it instantly. Everyone felt it. Veronica, I continued, my voice now a low, compelling rumble that demanded attention. You said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave. Veronica nodded slowly, her composure utterly shattered. Yes, I did. Then let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever worked without your husband backing you? Have you ever built something with your own two hands without your family's money or even just your husband's established wealth? Veronica stammered, scrambling for dignity. I have my own achievements, Alara. Like what? I asked with genuine, cutting curiosity. Tell me, I'm waiting to be impressed. Veronica adjusted her hair nervously. I manage our investments, I oversee properties, I make important decisions in our businesses. I nodded slowly. Businesses your husband built, properties you bought together, investments made with the capital he generated. Or am I wrong? Franklin intervened again, clearly annoyed. That's not fair, Alara. My wife works just as hard as I do. Of course, I replied calmly, not bothering to argue the point of hard work. I don't doubt she exerts effort. But there is a crucial difference, Franklin, between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. Between overseeing an empire you either inherited or stepped into, and building it brick by brick with nothing but sheer willpower and determination, don't you think? Veronica pressed her thin lips together, her eyes flashing with a desperate, trapped rage. I don't know where you are going with this, Alara. Let me explain, I replied, allowing my voice to soften slightly as I began to tell my truth, the truth I had guarded for decades. 40 years ago, I was 23 years old. I was a secretary in a small, struggling company. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a single rented room. I ate the cheapest food I could find, and I was alone, completely and devastatingly alone. Marcus stared at me, his eyes wide. He had never heard this level of detail before, the raw truth of my beginnings. I continued, my voice thick with the memory of sacrifice. One day, I got pregnant. The father disappeared before Marcus was born. My family turned their backs on me. I had to decide whether to keep going or give up everything. I chose to keep going. I worked until the very last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Marcus was born, handing him over to a kindly neighbor during the day. I worked 12 hours a day, every day. I paused, drinking the last of my water, a necessary moment to contain the surge of emotion. No one at the table moved. I didn't stay as secretary, I went on. I studied at night. I took night courses. I learned English at the public library because I couldn't afford a proper class. I learned accounting, finance, administration, and law. I became an expert in things no one taught me, all on my own, all while raising a child alone, all while paying rent, buying food, paying for medicine, and buying clothes. Veronica was now staring intently at the surface of the table. Her arrogant confidence was visibly crumbling under the weight of my narrative. And you know what happened, Veronica? I climbed up, slowly, painfully, step by step, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to manager, from manager to director. It took me 20 years. 20 years of nonstop work, of sacrifices you and your husband can't even imagine. But I did it. I built it brick by brick. I looked around the table, holding their rapt, horrified attention. And do you know how much I earn now? I asked. Veronica shook her head, unable to speak. $40,000 a month, I announced. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on the universe itself. Marcus's fork clattered softly onto his empty plate. Simone's eyes went impossibly wide, a silent gasp escaping her lips. Franklin frowned in utter, immediate disbelief, and Veronica froze, her mouth slightly agape, the epitome of shock. $40,000, I repeated, letting the number resonate in the stunned silence. Every month for almost 20 years. That's nearly $10 million in gross income over my career, not even counting my substantial investments, bonuses, and company stock options. Veronica blinked several times, trying desperately to reconcile the elegant, powerful woman before her with the shabby mother Marcus had described. No, I don't understand. You earn $40,000 a month, but you live in that small apartment? That's right, I replied calmly. I am the regional director of operations for a major multinational corporation. I oversee 5 countries. I manage budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. I make decisions that affect more than 10,000 employees. I sign contracts that you, Franklin, couldn't even read without 3 corporate lawyers, and I do it every day. Marcus was utterly pale, shock and pride warring on his face. Mom, why did you never tell me? I looked at him, my expression softening with genuine, deep love. Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. Because I wanted you to become a responsible, empathetic person, not an entitled heir. Because money corrupts the weak and I wasn't going to let it corrupt you. Simone finally found her voice, a shaky whisper. But then, why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car? I smiled, a genuine, powerful smile this time. Because I don't need to impress anyone, Simone, because true wealth isn't shown off. Because I learned that the more secure you are in your own power, the less you need to prove it to the outside world. I turned my intense gaze back to Veronica. That's why I came dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I acted like a broke and naive woman. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. My voice dropped, heavy with accusation. I wanted to see your true colors, Veronica, and boy, did I see them. I saw them perfectly. Veronica was a terrible shade of red, a mixture of shame, blinding rage, and crushing humiliation. This is ridiculous. If you earned so much money, we would know, Marcus would know. Why would he believe you are poor? Because I let him, I replied simply. Because I never talked about my job, because I live simply. Because the money I earn, I invest, I save, I multiply. I don't spend it on flashy jewelry or showing off in expensive restaurants. Franklin cleared his throat, trying one last time to regain control. Even so, Alara, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you misinterpreted our intentions. Really. I looked at him, boring into his eyes. I misinterpreted when you said I was a burden to Marcus. I misinterpreted when you offered to pay me $700 to disappear from his life. I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, my life. Franklin opened and closed his mouth, speechless. Neither he nor Veronica could muster an answer. Marcus was afraid I was a burden, I continued, my voice unwavering. And you reinforced that fear. You enjoyed humiliating a woman you believed was beneath you. You enjoyed treating me with pity. I stood up fully, everyone's eyes snapped to me. The timid woman was gone, replaced by the formidable director. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you, I said, addressing Veronica and Franklin directly. Money does not buy class, it does not buy real education. It does not buy empathy. You have money, perhaps a lot, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters. Veronica shot up from her seat, furious and cornered. And you do, you who lied, who deceived us, who made us look like fools. I didn't make you look like fools, I replied coldly, leaning in slightly. You took care of that all on your own. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you are, and you did it magnificently. Simone had tears forming in her eyes, staring at me with a mixture of awe and distress. Mother-in-law, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I know, I interrupted her gently. You didn't know about my money. But your parents knew exactly what they were doing. I looked back at Veronica, who was trembling. They knew they were humiliating me, and they enjoyed it until they discovered that the poor woman they scorned has more wealth than they do. And now they don't know what to do with that information. Veronica was visibly shaking. You have no right to treat us this way. I have every right, I replied, my voice ringing with authority, because I am your son-in-law's mother, because I deserve respect. Not because of my money, not because of my job, but because I am a human being, something you conveniently forgot throughout this entire dinner. Marcus took a step toward me, his hand reaching out. Mom, please, let's go, I can't stand this. I placed a hand on his arm, restraining him. Not yet, son, I'm not finished yet. I looked at Veronica one last time, ensuring she met my gaze. You offered to help me with $700 a month. Let me make you a counteroffer, Veronica. I will give you $1 million right now in cash if you can prove to me that you have ever treated someone kindly who didn't have money. Veronica opened her mouth, closed it, desperately searching her mind for a defense, a justification, an example. She said nothing. Exactly, I replied, the truth hanging heavy between us. You can't, because to you, people are only worth what they have in the bank, and that is the fundamental difference between you and me. I built wealth, you just spend it. I earned respect, you buy it. I have dignity. You have bank accounts. I reached into my old canvas tote bag, the one she had judged so harshly. I pulled out a black, sleek platinum credit card, an invitation-only card that symbolized limitless corporate spending. I dropped it on the table right in front of Veronica. This, I announced, is my corporate card. Unlimited limit. Pay for the entire dinner with a generous tip. Consider it a gift from a broke and naive mother who just exposed your shallow hearts. Veronica looked at the card as if it were a venomous snake. Black, shiny, with my name engraved in stark silver letters, Alara Sterling, Regional Director. Her hand trembled slightly when she finally picked it up, observed it, and then looked at me. Her eyes no longer held that superior shine. Now there was something new, something I never thought I'd see in her, fear. I don't need your money, she said, her voice broken and weak. I know, I replied, allowing myself a moment of pity for her sudden loss of power. But I didn't need your pity either, and yet you offered it to me throughout the entire dinner, disguised as charity. So take this as a gesture of courtesy or good manners, something you clearly didn't learn despite all your travels through Europe. Franklin slammed his fist gently on the table. Enough, Alara, this is out of control. You are disrespecting us. Respect? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. How interesting that you use that word now. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she suggested I was a burden to my son? Where was it when she offered to buy me off so I would disappear? Franklin clenched his jaw, unable to answer. Veronica just wanted to help, he finally muttered weakly. No, I corrected him firmly. Veronica wanted to control. She wanted to ensure that the poor, embarrassing mother wouldn't ruin her daughter's perfect image. She wanted to eliminate the weak link in the chain. The problem is she chose the wrong link. I looked at Simone. Her head was bowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, visibly trembling. Simone, I said softly, calling her name without accusation. She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks, her flawless makeup smeared. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice choked. I'm so sorry, I didn't know that my parents— Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted her. Because you did know, maybe you didn't know about my financial standing, but you knew how your parents are. You know how they treat people they consider inferior, people who are less fortunate, and you did nothing to stop them. You stayed silent because their money and approval were more important than defending your husband's mother. Simone sobbed quietly. I wanted to say something, but they are my parents. It's hard. I know it is, I replied, my voice holding a note of deep sympathy for her difficult position. And Marcus is my son, and yet I let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his life, his wife, his path, because that is how you love. With freedom, not with control, not with money, and certainly not with manipulation. Marcus rushed toward me, pulling me into a fierce embrace. Mom, forgive me. Please forgive me for never asking, for simply assuming, for thinking you were fragile. His voice cracked with emotion. I hugged him tightly, stroking his back. You don't have to apologize, son. I did what I did for a very clear reason. I wanted you to be independent, to value the right things in life, not to depend on me financially, and to build your own life based on your merit, not my wealth. But you made me feel like I had to protect you. You made me worry about you, Marcus said, that you were fragile. I know, I replied gently, pulling back to look at his face. And it wasn't wrong that you thought that, Marcus, because that's how you learn to care. That's how you learn to worry about others and to be empathetic. Those are lessons money can't buy, and they are lessons your in-laws clearly never taught their daughter. Marcus hugged me again, overwhelmed. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Veronica was still standing, rigid, watching the scene with a mixture of confusion, contained rage, and a profound sense of having been robbed. This doesn't change anything, she finally said, her voice strained. You lied, you deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions, you acted in bad faith. That's true, I nodded, accepting the charge. I pretended to be something I'm not, but tell me, Veronica, is that not exactly what you do every day? Franklin looked genuinely perplexed. What is that supposed to mean? It means that you and Veronica hide behind your money, behind your jewels, behind your trips, behind everything you can buy, I explained. But inside, you are empty. You don't have deep conversations. You don't have real interests beyond what's next on your shopping list. You have nothing to offer the world beyond a bank account. Veronica gave a dry, bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the expensive room. Coming from someone who lied all night, that's rich, Alara, that's hypocrisy. Perhaps, I replied, meeting her stare without flinching. But my lie exposed the truth, your truth, and now you can't hide from it. Now you know that I saw you, that I felt every condescending comment, that I stored every insult disguised as helpful advice, and I will never forget it. The waiter timidly approached the table. Excuse me, would you like anything else? Franklin shook his head abruptly, his dignity in tatters. Just the check. Veronica sank back into her seat, completely defeated. Her posture was no longer that of an elegant queen. It was the posture of someone who had just lost something far more important than a few $1,000s. She had lost her power. Alara, Veronica said, her voice now softer, less aggressive, stripped of its former venom. I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. Marcus and Simone love each other. They have a life together. We can't let this. I interrupted her, not with a shout, but with firm finality. Let this what? Let this ruin your plans. Let this expose what you really think about people who work for a living. It's too late for that, Veronica. The damage is done. But we can fix it, she insisted, grasping at straws. We can start over. We can apologize. No, I cut her off firmly. We can't, because now I know who you are and you know who I am. And that truth cannot be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like trash, and you did it with pleasure because you thought you could get away with it. Franklin cleared his throat, making one last attempt to shift the blame. You were the one who came here lying. You provoked this entire situation. You're right, I nodded, agreeing readily. I provoked this because I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I already suspected, that you are not good people, that your money doesn't make you better, that you are exactly the kind of people who despise others for not having the same things you do. Veronica wiped away a tear, but I offered no comfort. I won't apologize for building a life of integrity and then testing those who sought to judge me, I stated. The test wasn't about money, it was about character, and you both failed spectacularly. I leave here tonight knowing that my son married into a family whose value system is rotten to the core. I turned toward Marcus, pulling him close for one last squeeze. Come on, son, let's go home. Marcus, still deeply moved and shocked but now immensely proud, held my hand as we walked toward the exit. I looked back at the table. Veronica was still seated, holding my black platinum card in her hand, her expression one of utter defeat and terror. Franklin was staring blankly at the expensive tablecloth, his large watch suddenly looking cheap and theatrical. Simone was crying quietly, her head resting on her arms. Their picture of a perfect, wealthy, powerful family had been completely, irrevocably shattered. I had come as the humble, poor mother, and I left as the true power in the room. I didn't need their charity, I only needed their truth, and I got it. I got justice, dignity, and most importantly, I finally saw the depth of my son's love and loyalty, which proved far more valuable than all the money I had ever earned. I walked out of that expensive restaurant and into the cool night air, feeling richer than ever before. My name is Alara Sterling, and the story of how I raised my son to be a good man, despite having enough money to spoil him, is just getting started.